Alright, so I cut about 30 thousandths out of squish band. Motor rolls over now, no interference. So now in order to check the measurement, we gotta put some screws in it. So I just do the opposite two corners of those pins. And we're not putting a lot of stress on this, so there's no need to put a whole bunch of screws in there. And there's no need to over tighten or anything like that. It's just snug it down and we'll go from there. So we snug that down, make sure we don't interfere. Taking about 30 thousandths out of the squish. I think we'll be over 40. So bend the wall. It's 32 thousandths, 60 40 acid core solder, soft. You don't want to use any kind of hard solder in here, and you don't want to use any kind of like lead-free solder. That's pretty hard stuff. Hold it over to this side of the cylinder, so I'm all the way to the edge. Roll it over, and I can just about tell you how tight this is by turning it over. And we have very little clearance at all. I can turn it over, things will move enough to do that, but this is about as flat as it's ever going to get. It's squeezing that solder about as far as it can. And by having it all the way to the edge, the top of the piston has a little rolled edge to it, and it's not actually tight to the edge, so it leaves a burr right on the end. And I cut that little, I don't know what it is, 1/16 of an inch off of there, so that doesn't interfere with anything. Take that little burr thing off of there, and we measure it. And this is going to be a false measurement. This, I guarantee you that, because it'll say something like 12. And there we are, 12. So, oops, I can leave that in there and still try to show it to you. So, I know my lines are hard to see. Let me see if I can see here and show you. But I think you get the idea. The line is in the middle here, right there, and that's 10, that's 15, so we're right at 12, and that's about as far as this solder will ever squeeze. So I know I want 20 thousandths clearance. That says 12. I very safely can take another 8 thousandths out, and that's what I'm going to do, and then we'll be back. Alright, I took another 8 thousandths out, bolted it back down, cut the end off of my solder, get to a fresh end on solder. We'll measure this again, see what we come up with this time. It was measure 12, which I think is a lie, not accurate, because I know you can't squeeze this stuff much smaller than 12. So, yeah. 15 or so. Might be as high as 18, but I don't think we're going to be 20 yet. 17, 18, 17 and a half, 18. That's I would say we're at 17 and a half. So I probably will take another 2 thousandths, and then I'll probably run my block through there, and sanding block through there, and sand it. My battery for my cordless drill just crapped out on me, so I've got a corded drill here that I use, and we'll be back after I cut two more thousandths, and we'll see what we end up with. Alright, so I cut 2 more thousandths out of the squish band there. I wanted to show you kind of how wide the squish band was getting. You see it's gotten to be a lot wider than when I first showed, and this is probably to its full width. It's not going to get much any wider than this. And some guys feel that this is too wide and will put an angle on it. I've really not had too many issues with having one this wide. So anyways, I cut the extra 2 thousandths out of it. We're going to sand it back on. Got my sanding block on my old electric drill, and you don't want to put too many turns in there. You get all this powder in there. See what you can see. You get all this powder in there, all this dwarf, and it's very fine, and it wants to walk up the side of that block. So you don't want to leave it in there for an extended amount of time. You'll start to scratch the plating, and I don't care to do that. Another thing, grab a pick here. This is what we call a ring of death. This cylinder is not plated all the way to the very top, and we've cut it even further without there being any plating up there. So, I don't know if you can see my pick or not, but the plating stops there, and it goes up to there. You get almost 100 thousandths up here. Or so, where there's no plating, and there's a little lip there where the plating ends. Okay, and you don't want to cut enough off of the base that the top piston ring catches that. It'll suck the top of the piston right off. So you don't want to cut so much off that you're going to get up to that point. Otherwise, you'd have to run the saw with only the bottom ring on it, not top ring on it, and not ideal. So there's just one other little thing I wanted to point out. And I put a little mark on the backside of the piston. I got a new piston on order for this, and it's not here yet, so I'll be rechecking my squish before I assemble this saw in case I have to adjust it just a little bit, which I doubt I'll need to. It's an OEM piston. I'm replacing it with an OEM piston. We shouldn't have any issues with that. So we're going to bolt it back down. Back side of the piston here, I blacked it out with the magic marker. And I want to show you something else that you have to keep in mind when you're cutting a base cylinder. Run that one down. Alright, cut our solder off. Get back in there. This whole process has taken me about 15 minutes maybe. So, cut my little sharp edge off. Felt really good as far as resistance and turning it over. Turn this up here, and there's my 20, there's my mark. I'm at 19.5. And I could sand it just a hair more if I wanted to. That's about 19.75. It's you know, within a half thousandths of where I want it. 19.5, 19.5, get up there too far. 19.5. I'm happy with that. I'm going to live with that, especially since I'm going to be changing the piston. I'm going to be coming back and looking at that anyway. So let's look at the other issue here that you know, a lot of people don't think about until it's too late. Yeah, the right end of the wrench. So when we cut that base, we're dropping that cylinder. Like I said on this one, I dropped it 40 thousandths. Let me get you in there where you can see something. Maybe turn that a little further, huh? Something like that. We're looking in here, and we can time this exhaust port right now if we want to. You can see where I blacked out the piston there. What I want is run that piston all the way up top dead center. Just watch that piston movement. That's close enough, just so it's kind of right at the very top. And normally I do this with a pencil, but this is an old piston. We're not going to reuse it. So I'm going to scribe this so that you can see it better. Okay. Now let's get that back off of there. A lot of guys, you know, they'll drop the cylinder down and ditch that base gasket, and they're gaining all kinds of compression, and boy, they're going to turn the world on fire. And they go and they slide it back on there, and as they're porting, and all of a sudden they notice a problem. And I've seen it many times. So you put back out. Let's push that back off so I can just show you the piston. So now you can see the scribe line right here, right? I knew a safe number here that I can cut off of this, so I didn't show this earlier because I know these saws very well. I know what I can do to it. But a lot of guys will cut a whole bunch off. And then the free ports. Your port becomes open to your crankcase on your exhaust port, and I don't see that as being ideal at all. There's guys that say that there's enough unburned fuel lost out the exhaust that it's drawing it back in, and you're going to get some power there. But why not just bring that? Why not bring that through the carburetor instead of the exhaust port? Know what I'm saying? It's not polluted. So I don't want to solder free port. The other thing guys do is they want to make the intake duration longer, so they'll chuck this up in the lathe and they'll cut, you know, 20-30 thousandths off the skirts. You know, if you do both skirts, that's another thing that'll cause a free port. So if you only do the intake skirt, that's fine. You know, I mean, you can alter your duration on your intake port, again without changing the shape of the port, by taking a little off of the piston. I very rarely do any piston work at all. I put all the work into the cylinder that I can. There's times, some certain models, that I do some piston work, but generally not. I want the customer to be able to replace piston by himself if he needs to, or if he takes it to another shop that doesn't do porting. It's just a stock piston. There's nothing done to that piston. It's bone stock. Slap it in there, put it back together, and it's good to go. So that's one of the things. And then, you know, other guys do pop-ups. That's another part of porting. I got one laying around here somewhere. Here. So this is what they call a pop-up. This one's been welded on, I believe. We welded it up and then turned it back down. But sometimes I'll just, you know, take 20-30 thousandths off. Leaves a little pop-up. This is a lazy man's way of trying to add compression. And it does. You know, I mean, you're filling up a void, right? It's material you're putting in a hole. It's got to increase compression. This is a big pop-up on this one. Normally it's only like 20 thousandths, 30 thousandths that guys will do that with. And that's not, you know, 5 or 10 pounds of compression. It ain't that big a deal. And then when you take it back to, and you set your squish, and then you take it back to another dealer to have it fixed, and then, or you're going to put a piston in it yourself, you take it apart, and you can't put a stock piston in it. Now you got to send the saw off to have it machined so the piston is right. And that just costs you extra money down the road, where I try to avoid that if I can. I don't remember what this was for. This was just a practice playing around thing. I've done this several saws where we've done pop-up pistons like this and tested them, and then I cut the pop-up off and tested them, and virtually no difference. It literally really doesn't do much of anything. And in most cases, I would say if anything, I actually had better performance with it cut flat than with the pop-up on it. And I contribute that to flow characteristics as far as scavenging goes. It's pushing that fuel up instead of back towards the intake. And I strongly believe that the best way to have it scavenge is that the fuel comes through the transfers on an angle like this. It's going back to the back intake side of the cylinder, and it hits the wall back here and then wraps up and over and out the exhaust. And that's how these engines scavenge. And if and I'll get into that more in detail when I do my transfer porting, but it's just, this can be done. Added into what we're doing here as far as squish goes. Another mistake that guys make is they'll measure the squish out here, you know. They'll put a piece of wire on some grease and they'll do all four spots, you know, and they'll measure it all. I'm cutting everything flat and square and true, and I don't need to do that. I've done it several times, and it's just not necessary. The results are the same as what I just did. And but what I catch when I put my wire in there is that they didn't clearance the pop-up. And I've seen so many of them that are literally no clearance on the edge of the pop-up. They got 20,000 squish clearance between the piston and the squish band in height. But where this pop-up is in width, they don't have it there. And it'll be really, really tight, and that's a no-no. This also affects squish velocity, because as it's compressing and that squish band gets tighter and tighter and tighter, the air has to leave that. And of course, this outer ring is by far bigger than the inner ring, and so the air is being compressed as it's coming out. They call that a squish velocity. and it's the speed that air has to move. And by adding that in there, it only hampers squish velocity even further. So, and then when it's extremely tight, like near zero, I can't imagine how much negative effect it has on the engine's performance by, you know, really hampering that squish velocity, not letting that go where it wants to go. So I don't like pop-ups. I never have. I've shown many times in testing that it's really not anything big to it. It's not, you know, cut the squish band out, leave the piston flat. Follow the designers of the engine in the first place. Just enhance what's already there. Don't try to reinvent the wheel, you know. So domed pistons is a whole different ball game, and this is not a domed piston. This is a shelved pop-up silly idea. So we'll continue on with the next video.